Mr. Brown, thank you for inviting me back into this hall. Second time in a long time. I'm not one of those who get to do the Friday night thing every year, but it is good to be back in this hall. Agriculture. Technology making agriculture work for Barbados. As a youngster, going to school here at Combermere, it was only when I got into sixth form that I started to dabble in agriculture. Yes, I came from a St. Thomas parish, semi-rural, Warrens, Jackson area. And I became intrigued with it when I started to grow seasonings and making good money out of it. And I asked myself, what do you want to do with your life to contribute to the development of yourself and to your country? I had never did biology, but I said, well, if I need to do that, I will go and do it. So I went and worked at Intel Barbados, and they were willing to keep me and to have me as a young person who they would train and move up the ladder. I enjoyed the experience. The systems that they had lasted with me even up to now. They were very organized, and it is one company which I think had a tremendous impact on Barbados, and it would be good to do a tracer of persons who went through Intel and see how they have developed. I left Intel and got a call into the only place that I had written an application to, that is to the sugar industry for a job. I worked at the Sugar Technology Research Unit in the lab because chemistry and maths was my specialty. I did at A level. And there the experience of doing the analysis for sugar and going to the sugar factory where we were doing analyses and that kind of thing excited me. And I said, well, I needed to go and do the biology that I needed to do in order to really put myself into agriculture. I then got a call from some persons who also had worked at STRU, but they worked at Light and Power. And they tell me, well, they're looking for a lab assistant. So I said, well, it's paying a bit more. I'm near to Carefield. I can go and do the biology. So I went and did biology and got an opportunity then to possibly go and study agriculture. But as someone who didn't have the wherewithal to pay my way, I had worked and I had saved. And I got the opportunity through a bursary to do first year agriculture at St. Augustine. Then the John R. Bovell Scholarship came up, and I was able to win that scholarship. And so I was able to complete my studies. So I'm eternally grateful for someone from the sugar industry who had done a lot of work and who was recognized, John R. Bovell, as one who allowed me, through the scholarship that was named after him, to get an education at university level. The sugar industry, which I have worked in for the last 15 years or so of my work experience, is an area which I saw major challenges in just before I started working in it. I used to be involved in the ministry dealing with all the change of use applications coming in, all the golf courses at the time, which was the flavor of the month. And I consider them real estate development masquerading as a sport. And we recognized that agriculture was under threat, and unless we try to do something about that movement of lands away from agriculture, the sugar industry would die and would take with it, because of its size, possibly a lot of the rest of agriculture. And so I told myself, what is it that we can do? And I talked to people in the industry, and I threw out some ideas, and I got involved to the point where I was asked to sit on the board of the BAMC at the time. And then I became the general manager, eventually having worked with the farm and do some things. And people said, well, if you're doing this, why not apply for the position? It is there that I recognized the major challenges that faced the industry were not just growing the crops, but the fact that the markets which we hitherto were selling to as a guaranteed market was no longer remunerative. So we were selling sugar in Europe at a price way below the cost of production, and we were still moving along with those guaranteed situations, selling bulk raw sugar, rather than seeking to develop the nice sugars that we produce. When you talk to people in the industry and the world, and they tell you about our sugar, there's something, and Mr. Brown maybe touched on it. The French call it terroir, meaning it's a combination of the sand, the soil, the this, the that gives our sugar a flavor and a uniqueness which we haven't been able to exploit to the extent that we should have. I got involved with a project in which, while having discussions with all of the Europeans who would come down and have meetings with the Sugar Association of the Caribbean and discuss, what is the future and what is the pricing going to be like for bulk. At those meetings, I used to be saying, what can we do that is different? And so I met a young man, Chris Doherty, and he, like me, had a view that we can do some things differently. And we were able, through some stealth, to get Barbados sugar placed in places like Harrods and Waitrose and those high-end outlets. The challenge that we had, though, was that while that initial product was a good entry point, I said to him, we also need to have a product that will continually sell. That product was mostly in a tin and very attractive, but it could be a centerpiece. And you look at it and you say, yes, I got something from Barbados, but we wanted you to be able to replace that sugar by using it. And so one of the barriers to entry was getting the level of certification for our sugar factory that is required for us to be able to sell into those external markets. I said to myself, I gotta find a way. And against some persons who were saying it wouldn't happen, we were able to get Portville HACCP certified by an international organization. The workers there worked tirelessly to ensure that we got that, we achieved that. That allowed us to be able to sell into the UK, and we are still continuing to sell sugar into the UK to select markets. But the challenge is still there. We are a high-cost producer because we don't have scale relative to some of the other producers in the world. So while we can go after these small niches, we still have a challenge that the volumes aren't as great to allow us to be able to sustain the whole industry. So yes, it helped to pay some of the bills, but unfortunately, the situation arose where government then had to be the major supporter of the industry for a number of years because of that situation in which the Europeans, having given us a guaranteed market, they no longer were willing to give us a price that was remunerative. They cut the price even further by 36%. So the sugar industry faced severe challenges from 2003 onward, when that 36% cut in the price came along. During those periods, we started looking at different things that we can do, technologies we can try to implement. But a challenge with all of that is that it costs, all of these things cost money. And with an industry that doesn't have the wherewithal to do it, how do you attract that capital into the industry if you want to move it from where it is a loss-making situation into one which can at least break even or make some profit? Because we are all, as business people, into making money, to making some profit. The industry then started looking at various alternatives. We got to the point where a view was that, okay, the technology at Portville and Buckley was a bit outdated, and we needed to modernize in order to be able to meet the international standards, because while HACCP was the entry point, it wasn't enough. They'd wanted ISO 22000, and also some others wanted other certain standards associated with their particular entity setting standards. So they will send down large wads of paper for you to ensure that you are ticking off all of the things, meeting all the requirements, so that they can say that you are not using child labor, you're not using this, you're not using that. So the barriers to entry are significant, but we tried and we are still trying to do that. When you have a situation in which your local market isn't guaranteed to you, it's a challenge. We try to work with the ministry where we got to the point where the BADMC has been designated as the entity which can do the importing of sugar. I don't know where that is at in terms of the final situation as to whether persons can still import from CARICOM, because that was the issue. While externally we couldn't bring in sugar from non-CARICOM states, there were persons in Barbados who were willing to buy sugar from other CARICOM countries and compete with Barbados for supermarket space. We have tried some things along the way to counter that. At the present, we are producing various grades of sugar, and you will see them in the supermarket at different price points, because we recognize that we have to try to compete. It's not something which you can just lay down and say that you're not trying. So BAMC right now, as an entity, has a packaging facility which packs year-round. That is one of the outcomes of the interventions we made with the WISCO, and they have continued to help with the development of the local market for packaged sugar and also internationally. They have some connections which they are looking to get into niche markets into the US. There is a tariff rate quota of some 7,000 tons into the US, and we are hopeful that we would be able to get some sugar into the US using that market. But there's an opportunity for us beyond sugar, because the sugarcane plant has some features of it which allows us to be able to get into the energy business. And it is in that area which I see as possibly representing the greatest opportunity for the sugarcane industry to help Barbados meet that very laudable target of 100% renewable energy by 2030. So one of the things that we have looked at is how can we, if we are going to go into energy, be able to supply energy on a year-round basis. We toyed around with a number of possibilities, but the current thinking that I have in mind, and it is something which is evolving, having looked at the various technologies around the world, is something which is simple, and that is using anaerobic digestion as a basis for creating a gas which can then be cleanly burned and used to generate electricity. We believe that based on what is happening in Europe, which is a major center for that type of technology, they don't have the advantage that we have, but they still use it. They have a winter, and they have to heat the material in order to bring it to a temperature in which the organisms can function. In the tropics, we don't have that. The organisms are here when we have our cow dung and whatnot. Those are part of the organisms that is used to help break down the material, create methane, biogas as it is called. And then we can upgrade that to methane and use reciprocating engines to produce electricity. So that is the direction I see us going in within the national energy policy, which is between draft and being finalized. Some 50 megawatts of power is allocated to the sugar industry. How we achieve that level of material to satisfy the industry is part of what I've been looking at as the way forward for the industry. The slide that is there indicates the various outputs that is possible within sugar industry. Sugar from the cane juice, water is also a possibility because 60% of the weight that we transport in transporting canes along the roads is water. So sometimes these little things may not seem sexy, but if you know the margins on a bottle of water and why we import so much of it, and sometimes the quality isn't that great, I ask myself, why aren't we in that business? We have heat, we have water, why aren't we in the water business? Within the production system that we are recommending, that is anaerobic digestion, you'll be able to produce electricity, and there's a lot of waste heat that is produced as a result of that whole process. I worked at Light and Power as part, just after I mentioned I moved from Sugar Technology Research Unit to Light and Power. And the hot pot, more money was spent in the hot pot than was spent in generating electricity. Electricity generation at the time was around 23-24% efficient in terms of the electricity. But then all of the fuel that was used, the additional energy in there, had to be circulated into the sea in order to, Mr. Brown would know this, I worked there when he was one of the senior engineers at the company. I used to work in the lab with the steam plants that are still going, 2 steam plants, S1 and S2. And it amazed me that, there was so much energy in a base material, but it isn't utilized. You only look at one aspect of it, that is the electricity, and the rest just goes to waste. Within a reconfigured sugar industry, I see waste heat as one of the prime areas for exploitation, and this is where the engineers now will come in and give guidance to that whole process. How can we create value out of waste heat? Waste heat can be used for drying crops, cooling, also using absorption chillers, etc. These are things that are being used overseas, and it is possible for us to be able to use those type of technology to generate waste heat. The level of production, which is currently on a trajectory back upwards towards the 350,000 tons, which we believe Portville can manage as a facility. We are currently doing just around less than half of that. Last year we did around 145,000 tons. But with assistance that government has provided to the industry and the response that we have gotten, we are seeing the yields in the industry coming back up. We are using technology now which is assisting us in respect to fertilizers. The fertilizers that we are using are slow release fertilizers that have been introduced by one farmer, and it is now gaining position as the way to go. One particular farm, they have been able to average in excess of 35 tons to the acre, something which is a gold standard. So while all of the industry may not be able to reach that, we believe, and the industry has said to us, that they believe an average of 28 tons in a good year, 24 in a reasonable year, and when you got an off year, well, you're at the mercies, is what we will be looking at dealing with. To get towards that 50 megawatts will require us having to plant additional biomass in order to be able to digest that. And the industry had done some research work on canes other than those which can produce sugar, and these were energy cane types. And I believe that there's a place for those within the production system, allowing us to be able to use both the fermentable sugars that are in those cane along with the fibers to be able to generate a significant level of electricity. So we see biomass, the renewable energy, biomethane and electricity as two possible areas which can generate significant revenues. And why biomethane? Because you can put that into the national grid, which runs around near to Portville. So if we are using Portville as a factory base, you can either have an alternative of putting some of it, if you have access, into the national gas grid, or using it to generate electricity. Molasses to ethanol, and that is the rum. The rum industry is one of the more profitable adjuncts of a sugar industry, but the sugar industry doesn't benefit to the extent of some other industries have done in the world. So in Jamaica, you have a grower of cane who is also, you will hear Appleton. They grow cane, and they have also the Appleton, but the rum industry is separated from the sugar industry. And so the value add that is derived doesn't come to the sugar industry as it should. Molasses is treated as a byproduct, not as an important product. And with what the rum industry wants to do, that is say that we are the ones who, they are the ones who created rum in the world, they invented rum. I believe there's an opportunity for us, as they seek to go up the value chain, for them to recognize that the base material comes from the sugar industry, and to give a level of pricing that will allow both them and the industry to survive. So that dialogue has started under the guidance of the Honorable Minister, and we hope that we'll be able to bring that to some kind of conclusion to help in the overall monetary position of the industry. The rum industry, when it processes the molasses, produces something called vinairs, and vinairs is high in fertilizer. In Brazil, I've had opportunities to travel the world, and Brazil is one place which utilizes that material. It reduces the level of fertilizer that they have to supply, put back onto the fields. So you are able to reduce by up to 70% your fertilizer bill by cycling nutrients. So you would have put on, it comes out into the molasses as a residual product, and then the rum industry has this vinairs. And in the case of Brazil, where they use ethanol for vehicles and whatnot, they have a large amount of it and they use it onto the fields. The challenge with vineyards as a product directly is that it has some issues with smell and whatnot, and we see vineyards playing a role within the anaerobic digestion system, where if we can take that vineyards, which is a liquid, mix it in with the biomass and whatnot, you then have a basis on which you can digest the material and do very well. There is one plant being put up in Brazil, a 25 megawatt plant using that methodology, vineyards and the other products of the sugar industry to be able to diversify its sources of revenue. Biomass and molasses to feed. We see the opportunity. It is being done as part of the molasses users group. There's one feed manufacturer who uses some of the molasses from the factory in order to produce feed. But we see an opportunity where some of the additional biomass that is required can also be made into a feed using some of the waste seeds and the bagasse, etc., for some of the ruminants especially. So we want to push a black-bellied sheep industry, and I have here where the giant river tamarind and other biomass will help us to be able to support the black-bellied sheep industry by producing possibly a pelleted feed to be able to support that high-end part of agriculture. I mentioned the waste seed can be used for crop drying. One of the issues along the way in the production of onions that we had was whenever there was a bad weather, there was challenges associated with the farmer having spent so much money and effort and time in growing the onions could lose it with a downpour of rain that is more than 2 inches or so. And so a facility which is generating electricity now has the capability to use that waste seed to be able to produce onions on an ongoing basis throughout the year. It has the ability then to store those onions using the same waste seed in an absorption chamber cool facility. So these are the kind of technologies that we believe will give not scale but scope and allow the industry to be able to have multiple revenue sources, given that we have a challenge of being a high cost producer. Barbados, as was mentioned, is one of the leading cane breeding stations, and we have done some work with this energy cane. I visited Brazil, and they got material from Barbados as part of what they were doing also with energy cane, because the sugar industries around the world are looking at diversifying its product mixes in order to be able to survive also. So these energy canes have some potential. They're high yielding. They don't give you the purity of juice to make sugar, but because we are now looking at anaerobic digestion, it is the total dry matter content that is important. This is one of the traditional sugarcane varieties, and you're seeing just around 27 tons of biomass per hectare, while these other ones giving you a lot more, because it both contains some juice in the bricks, the cane, and also a lot of fiber, nearly 60% more than traditional sugarcane varieties. So technology, breeding technology is being used to produce varieties that can give us a potential source of additional revenue through the generation of electricity and other allied products. You see here, this is an example of some of the cane. This is in Brazil, where they're doing work with, these are the energy canes, and these are the traditional sugar cane. The same type of growth is seen in the Barbados setting also. So we see the production of power through the combined heat power and combined heat and power process, or cogeneration as it is called. We can use short rotation energy crops, the energy cane, leucaena, whatever, grass clippings from around the roadsides. All of that can be used to help generate electricity. And we will be producing also fertilizer as a result, which can then be put back onto the fields. And this will enhance the cost effectiveness, I believe, of sugar production by producing and cycling nutrients and moving towards what the modern persons call the circular economy. So anaerobic digestion is basically a breakdown of carbohydrates, fats, proteins down to biogas, which can then be upgraded to methane by taking out the carbon dioxide and other side gases that are, or contaminants that are in. There are some engines. The famous ones are made by GE, but there are a number of other manufacturers. And it allows you to do base load generation, electricity only, electricity and heat. That is what we call cogeneration, where we produce both heat and power. You can do heat, power, and cooling, tri-generation. And you can also do something now they call quad generation, where industries around the world who have issues with climate change and the generation of carbon dioxide is looking to monetize the carbon dioxide, creating value out of it. And I only recently, in doing some research, I came across some very interesting work being done in Korea, where they are showing, at least at the lab scale, the use of carbon dioxide to generate weak carbonic acid, use it as a battery basically to supply more energy and also to generate hydrogen. So that is something which may have some possibilities for us, but maybe not immediately. These are the type of engines that we're talking. So unlike the traditional boilers, we can then use the waste heat from these engines, which come out at nearly 400 degrees Celsius, to be able to cook the juice to make the sugar. They're flexible and they are produced to handle the hot conditions. So some of the electricity production, sometimes the challenges is having to find cooling systems to be able to get these to work. But these engines, that's like our car engines, is be able to generate high temperatures but cool. These engines have that capability. And they do it at a very much higher efficiency than traditional mass burn of biomass. These have efficiencies of up to 40% as opposed to the traditional burning of biomass, which at most would be around 25 or so %. So those represent some possibilities for us as we go forward. Cost-wise, I started to look at the possibilities of how much cane we might be able to produce. If we get around 135,000 tons this year, this is the trajectory that I'm anticipating, that by 2025, 26, we'll be back up to around 350,000 tons, which is what Portville can handle. The bagasse amount by then will be around 114,000 tons. And if we come to this bottom figure, this is the potential amount of power that can be produced from that amount of bagasse, close to 10 megawatts from the bagasse fiber alone. So that represents one possibility. As I said, it is this other area here, which is very interesting, the high fiber cane. Given the level of fiber that is in the cane and also the juice, you are able then to produce a lot more biogas and eventually biomethane and electricity. So from around 6,000 acres or so, we anticipate you will be able to produce, you'll be able to produce around 31 megawatts of power from that particular material. So while it may have looked at something in the industry, sugar industry, as, boy, that can't produce sugar, now that energy is going to play a more integral role, it is something I think that the industry has to look at and recognize that we have to go in that direction going forward. These are the order of magnitude of revenues that the industry would be able to make if we are able to get close to that 50 megawatt target, which, as I said, using the various biomass sources along with the 10 megawatts from biogas, we can reach if we plan for it by 2026 or thereabout. We are talking revenues of 127 million or so, which is not, which is nearly 10 times what we are currently getting from the industry. So we have an opportunity to get onto the energy bandwagon, and it would allow the expansion also of the other renewables, because you have base load capability in the biomass. Biomass is a store of energy. It's the battery there already. So unlike solar, which has to find a battery in order to be able to extend its use beyond the time when sunshine is available, biomass is a fuel that has stored energy and will allow then to act as even as a frequency regulator, because these engines, the ramp up is very short, so you can be peaking, you can use these as peaking power to also come in when there's a sudden cloud out there, which, you know, creates challenges for the power company as it's saying. You can then use these type of engines. So there are opportunities, I believe, going forward. We have other opportunities to select even this area of biodegradable containers. A lot of the replacement for the styrofoam is now coming from the sugar industry, and you don't need a lot of it in order to produce. As I said, we produced last year around 50,000 tons. I don't know if you can imagine what is 50,000 tons. Sometimes people can't imagine what that means, but a 20-foot container is just 20 tons. We produce 50,000 tons of bagasse. Some of that can be used to produce these containers, and the technology isn't that beyond us. So I believe that use of technology can assist the sugar industry, which is a major part of the agricultural sector. If we get things happening in sugar, I believe non-sugar will benefit. More fruit crops can be grown. Those ships that we bring in at the port can be supplied with more food, because we need to expand the market base and not just the 280,000 heads that we have, and, you know, competing with one another for that small market. But if we are able to supply those mega ships that come in, I think that would assist in the overall move towards having technology play a greater role in the agricultural sector. I thank you.